Welcome students to lesson 17 of the Living World topic. In this lesson we are going to explore how plants and animals survive in the harsh environment of a hot desert. Last lesson you learned about the heat and lack of rainfall in hot deserts, and that makes it extremely difficult for living organisms to survive there. But some organisms have found a way. Let's find out. Please write the date, title and learning objective and have a pen and paper ready to learn. Okay, time to review prior learning. Write 1 to 10, answer the questions from memory, and then mark your answers. Game time. Number 1. The living parts of an ecosystem are its biotic features. 2. One role of the producer is to provide food for animals. 3. The role of decomposers is to break down dead organic matter so that it can be absorbed through the roots of plants in the soil. 4. A nature reserve is a protected natural area that cannot be damaged by human activities such as logging. 5. Eutrophication is the excess of nutrients in a water body, which causes algal blooms that kill plants, leading to a loss of oxygen. 6. The species in an ecosystem are interdependent, which means that a change in the population of one affects the population of others. 7. Buttress roots help to support tall trees in rainforests. 8. The emergent layer is the highest in the rainforest. 9. Rainforests are said to be stratified, which means they have layers. 10. The highest density of leaves and branches in rainforests is found in the mid-canopy layer. Give yourselves a mark out of 10. If you got 8 or above, awesome work. Please write any questions you got wrong and their answers, and then test yourselves on these repeatedly until you know them. Okay, to introduce the ideas in this lesson, I'm going to show you a photo of an exceptional animal that has learned and adapted to the environment of a hot desert. Please look at the photo and then answer the questions that come next to it. Go for it. It's called the Fennec Fox, and here are the questions. So number 1, why is life in hot deserts challenging? What are the main challenges that life faces? Well, you should have said a few things. First one, the heat makes it difficult for animals to survive, because animals can't survive beyond a certain temperature. You should have said the lack of precipitation and rainfall makes it difficult because there's a lack of water scarcity. You may have also said there's a lack of food for animals, either in the form of other animals or in the form of vegetation, plants. 2. There is a lack of vegetation in hot deserts. How would this affect the nutrient cycle, for example, compared to in a rainforest? Well, you should have said that vegetation provides the dead organic matter, the litter, that is decomposed and in being decomposed provides nutrients to the soil. A shortage of producers and vegetation means that there is less organic matter to mix into the soil, which means that the soil is infertile. Consequently, it's very difficult for vegetation to grow. 3. How is this animal that you see here adapted to life in hot deserts? Well, you're going to find out more about this in this lesson, but you should look at, for example, the colour of its fur, the size of its ears, and the hole that it's standing next to, and consider how that might allow it to survive in a hot desert. 4. Why are cacti found in hot deserts? Well, if you know anything about cacti, you'll know that they can survive with very little water. Maybe some of you have them at home as pot plants. You'll also know that they have spines, which protect them in another way. And finally, you'll know that they either have very few leaves or no leaves at all, which is a further adaptation. In this lesson, you're going to find out more about cacti and other plants in much more detail, so that you become masters of this topic. Join me. The key word today, write it in its definition, please. An adaptation. Okay, let's begin. Let's start with one of the most famous plants in a hot desert environment. Please write the subtitle and underline it. The real and technical word for a cactus and plants like cacti is succulent. A succulent is a plant with thickened fleshy stems and branches that contain water within them. The leaves are fattened, and there are very few branches and leaves. In fact, photosynthesis happens within the stem and branches themselves. So succulents have thickened, fleshy stems and branches that conduct photosynthesis and hold lots of water. A cactus is one prime example. I'm going to show you now how cacti are adapted to life in hot deserts. This particular cactus is probably the most famous type of cactus. It's called a saguaro cactus, Saguaro, and it's found in the Sonoran Desert in North Mexico. How is it adapted to life there? Well, the first thing is, it has very wide, shallow roots. The roots don't go very deeply into the soil, but they spread out meters to each side. Why is that an adaptation? Well, when it rains very rarely, but it rains heavily. The water sinks into the soil, but much of it evaporates really quickly because of the heat. This means that the cactus needs to take advantage of the water hitting the surface as effectively as possible. So it spreads out a complex network of roots all around itself near the surface, which means that the moment the water penetrates through the top layer of the ground, it is absorbed into the roots. So having wide, shallow roots allows a cactus to capture as much water as possible during the rare moments of rainfall. But that's not all. A cactus, such as the saguaro cactus, has what are called pleats down its stem and its branches. These folds along its body. And these folds allow the cactus to expand. Why would it need to do this? Well, this photo was taken after a dry period in a desert. There hadn't been rainfall for a long time, so the cactus has shrunk, much like a balloon without air in it. But then it rains, and the cactus, having absorbed the water through its shallow roots, needs somewhere to put it. And so, the pleats, these folds, spread out, and so the cactus's body expands, allowing it to hold much more water. The stems in cacti store water. That's what it means to be a succulent. Many plants cannot do this, but cacti can. What else do they have in store? It's not only the stems, but also the bodies and the leaves. This is an aloe vera plant. Again, a classic feature of a succulent. The leaves are thickened compared to the leaves of trees you'd find in England, and they contain lots of water within them. All of these adaptations are necessary to survive water scarcity, the lack of water, and to hold on to it for as long as possible. Instead of leaves, cacti have spines. Spines don't help cacti as much with water loss, but they do protect the fleshy bodies from predation by animals. Some animals dig holes into the side of cactus and lay their nests, such as the Gila woodpecker. Some animals just eat the stems. The spines help protect cacti from that. And they also, because of their lack of size and the lack of water within them, reduce water loss compared to having leaves. And final adaptation of cacti is a really clever one. For plants to spread, to reproduce, they flower. However, flowers release a lot of water through evapotranspiration, and so it is not a good way to store and hold on to water. Consequently, cacti only flower immediately after rainfall. This allows insects to, in that short period, take the pollen from a cactus and spread it around the area, allowing the cactus to reproduce and grow elsewhere. The flowers quickly die off, allowing the cactus to hold on to its water again and prevent water loss. Plants in temperate climates like the UK have flowers for much longer periods because they aren't so concerned with water loss because it rains more regularly. Cacti only flower after rainfall, and the flowers only remain for a short time. But a cactus isn't the only type of plant in a desert. There's also a very special tree that lives in deserts around the world. And it's special because it has some key characteristics, features that allow it to survive. It's called the Mesquite Tree, and here it is. How is it adapted? Well, the first adaptation you should notice is beneath the ground. Unlike the cactus, the mesquite tree has long, deep roots. But let's start at the top first. Look at the branches of the mesquite tree. What do you notice that's similar to the cactus? Well, it has spikes. Predators, animals that feed off of the leaves, are discouraged from feeding because of the spikes. This allows it to retain its leaves, which means it can photosynthesize. However, look at the leaves themselves. They're tiny and thin. This means that the mesquite tree loses minimum amounts of water through evapotranspiration. Additionally, look below the surface. You'll see a long array of roots stretching deep down underground. The mesquite tree has some of the longest roots in the world. They stretch almost down to 30 meters in some cases. Why is that important? These are called tap roots, these long, deep roots, because they tap water deep underground. Compare the mesquite tree's roots to the saguaro cactus. The cactus has wide, shallow roots. The mesquite tree goes deep underground. Why? Because it's aiming to reach the water table. What is the water table? Well, when it rains on an area, some of the water sinks deep into the ground, and it continues to sink into the ground until it reaches a layer of impermeable rock that cannot absorb water. That's what impermeable means. And when that happens, the water builds up underground. However, in a desert, because of the shortage of rainfall, the water table is very low, deep underground. So for trees to be able to access the water stored underground, they need very long tap roots to be able to reach it. The mesquite tree does that. It's one of the most successful plants that survives in hot deserts for these two reasons. Even if on the surface it seems like there's no water in a desert, the mesquite tree is able to reach it through its tap roots. So that's the plants in a desert. What about the animals? The most famous mammal probably in deserts around the world is the camel. As soon as you see a camel, you think of a desert, possibly the Egyptian desert, but they're found in Asia as well. So how are they adapted to life in deserts? Well, let's start with their faces. Deserts are often sandy. The soil has dried up, and consequently sand, weathered rock, is blown around by the high winds that are often found in deserts. Camels have long eyelashes and double eyelids which protect them from sand going into their eyes. They also have long lips and a long tongue which allows them to reach fruit and leaves on trees with thorns. Remember how the mesquite tree and the cactus had thorns. Additionally, the camel has very thin and light-coloured fur. This reflects sunlight and so prevents the camel from warming up too much. The thin fur means that the camel radiates heat out of its body and so it remains cool. As the camel heats up, blood vessels near the surface send warm blood of the camel to very near its skin, allowing the heat to spread out from the body and cool down the camel. In its hump, the famous hump of the camel, is a whole section of fat that also contains water. This allows the camel to survive without food and water for many weeks in some cases. Critical in a biome with water scarcity, an arid climate with less than 250 millimeters of water per year. And finally, especially in sandy deserts, this is important, camels have very wide, soft feet, which means that in the sand, their weight is spread out and so they don't sink into the surface, allowing them to move easily across the soft desert sands. Camels are the perfect survivors in deserts, but they're not the only animals. Here it is, the Fennec Fox of the previous part of the lesson. An extremely intelligent animal, and an extremely well adapted animal to deserts. Let me show you how. First of all, look at these huge ears. While they also serve to help the fox work out where predators are that are hunting it, their main role is to spread heat out from the body, to dissipate heat. Dissipate means to spread something out. When heat is lost from the body of the fox cools down. Lots of blood vessels, tiny blood vessels called capillaries, capillaries, run through these large ears, and they radiate heat outwards into the air, so the fox cools down. Not only that, but the fox's feet are covered with a thick layer of skin, which means that they can absorb the heat of the sand without burning. Very important as well. The feet are wide, similar to a camel's, to support their weight on sand. One of the key characteristics of the fennec fox is an organ within it. We have organs in our bodies like our heart and our lungs and our livers and our stomach. An organ within the fox called the kidneys, which we have as well, which is specially adapted to survive in a desert. So what is the role of a kidney in the body? Well, the kidneys work out how much water we need to hold on to and how much water we need to release. If we drink lots of water, then we go to the toilet because our kidneys have worked out that we have too much water, and so we release the excess. If we have too little water, then when the blood travels through the kidney holds on to more of the water, and so you go to the toilet less, and less water is released. Now, the length of the kidneys decides how much water the kidney can hold on to. The fennec fox has a much longer kidney than a human kidney, allowing it to hold on to much more water. Consequently, it can hold on to water from food much more effectively, and it can survive without water for a longer time, which is vitally important in a desert. But it also behaves in a particular way which allows it to survive too. From a very young age, the fennec fox learns how to burrow underground. Just a few centimeters beneath the surface is much cooler, so it digs a hole and lives in there during most of the day. It sleeps usually during the day, and it comes out of its burrow and hunts at night. This behavior is called nocturnal behavior, Nocturnal, nocturnal behavior. Owls similarly do this. It's cooler at night, and so it's easier to survive then. That's why animals like the fennec fox are nocturnal. The fennec fox, a very special animal, and an exceptional survivor of hot deserts. Now let's move on to reptiles. It's not just mammals that have survived. Here's a cool looking reptile that you may not know of. It's called the thorny devil lizard, and it's found in Australia's Great Sandy Desert. Just look at it. Look at how it might be adapted. It's very distinctive. The first thing you notice about it is its camouflage. The colour of its skin matches perfectly to the plants that it hides within and the sand that it walks upon. That allows it to evade, evade, which means to escape predators. But that's not the only trick that allows it to survive predators. It also has this on its back. This is actually a fake head with spikes on it, so that predatory birds like eagles think that they're attacking its head, but they're not, meaning that the thorny devil lizard very often survives attacks and can escape. But it doesn't just have to survive predators, it also has to survive the heat and lack of water. And it has some very clever ways of doing this. And that centers around how it drinks. The thorny devil lizard can drink water, but it almost never needs to, because its skin is adapted in such a way that it can actually get water from the air or from the sand. Let me show you how. The thorny devil lizard has something called hygroscopic skin. It has tiny bumps on the surface of its skin, all along the skin that you can barely see, but they're there. Hygroscopic means that the skin attracts water. If water touches the skin, it clings onto it. It's called hygroscopic. And because of the way that these bumps on the skin are shaped, the water is moved towards the head of the animal and towards its mouth. So why does the water move up the animal? If the water stands in sand, if the animal stands in sand and buries its feet underground, or if it's a humid day with lots of steam and water vapor in the air, enough water clings to the animal's skin that it moves towards the head and the thorny devil lizard can survive without even drinking. So why does the water move? Well, it's because of something called capillary action. At the start of this experiment, this cup here on the left was empty, and this cup here was full with blue water. The experimenters took this piece of toilet paper and they connected these two cups. What happened? Well, when this piece of paper touched the blue water moved up the cup and over the top and into the smaller cup. As this experiment continued, the level of this cup filled up until they were both the same. This process where water and liquids move up through a solid substance like paper is called capillary action. It means that water can go upwards, overcoming even gravity. The same thing happens on the thorny devil lizard. These bumps on the surface of the hygroscopic skin act like paper in this experiment, and the water moves up them, up through the feet and towards the mouth, even though gravity should be pulling it down. Consequently, the thorny devil lizard can drink just from moist ground or from humid air with lots of water vapor in it. It's an ingenious adaptation. A fairly scary animal, but a very important one, the scorpion. This in fact is the Deathstalker Scorpion, and it's found in the Negev desert in Israel. And how is it adapted? Well, aside from being terrifying, it has some very clever ways of surviving with a lack of food and water. The Deathstalker Scorpion doesn't drink water. Every animal, mostly insects that it eats, has a small amount of water within its body. And the scorpion's body is excellent at extracting that water from the food's body and using it. And so the scorpion never needs to drink. A very important adaptation. Additionally, the scorpion has waterproof skin. It doesn't sweat, and no water goes in or out, meaning that it doesn't lose water through its body. Again, very important for its survival. And finally, the scorpion, much like many desert animals, especially the Fennec Fox, hides underground during the day and comes out and hunts at night. It is nocturnal. The coolness of the night allows it to survive, whereas in the day it would burn and it would die. So invertebrates, which are animals without spines, backbones, such as insects and scorpions — a scorpion is an arachnid like a spider — they don't need water, they often have waterproof skin, and they are very often nocturnal in hot deserts. These are the adaptations of some of the most well-known and some less well-known animals and plants, and they help you to understand how life survives. Okay, time to assess learning. Question 1. What is capillary action? Capillary action is the movement of a liquid through a solid, and it happens because liquids like water, they form columns, they connect up to each other, so you get a long line of liquid moving up a channel, such as a piece of paper. What is a taproot and why is it important? A taproot is a long, deep travelling root of a tree, in one case the Mesquite Tree, that reaches the water table, which is often very low in deserts because of the lack of precipitation. Question 3. What is a common feature of animal behaviour in hot deserts that allows them to survive? Many animals in hot deserts are nocturnal. That means they are awake at night when it's cooler, which means that they suffer less from the effects of heat and they lose less water from sweat. And finally, what does the saguaro cactus do after it rains heavily? Well, you could have said two things. First of all, its wide, shallow roots absorb the surface water that hits the ground. And secondly, the pleats, P-L-E-A-T-S, in its skin allow it to expand and store more water because it's a succulent. Okay, time to embed learning. Please look at the questions, write them down, and answer them using your understanding. Go for it. Number 1. Characteristics of a succulent plant. 2. 2 ways that desert plants are adapted to reduce water loss. So you need any 2 of these. Spines, waxy skin, trees shedding leaves, which reduces water loss, for example the mesquite tree. During extremely dry periods it loses its leaves. Only flowering after rainfall. Or you could have even said expanding. 3. Explain how the behavior of 2 desert animals helps them survive in a hostile environment. Any of these. In fact, in this case, you need both of these. 4. Outline 2 differences between mesquite trees and succulents in how they have adapted to water scarcity, which means a lack of rainfall and a lack of water in deserts. So you need both of these and fully explain them. So either both of these points or both of these points. Can you please give yourselves a mark out of the total? If you got 2 incorrect or lost marks or fewer, fantastic. Make sure that you add any corrections in green pen. Excellent. Okay, from the lesson, write 2 questions. Answer them from memory. And then in a week's time, test yourselves on those questions. I strongly encourage you to watch these 2 videos, which are linked below, to help boost your understanding further. Thank you so much for joining me this lesson. In the next 2 lessons, we are going to be looking at our case study of a hot desert. And we're going to go to a place called the Thar Desert, which straddles the border between India and Pakistan in South Asia. Join me then.